Right. Let's start. First, before we start, I just have to make a few announcements. Please keep the pathways leading to the doors clear. That's really important, and we really have to do it in case of an emergency. Someone has to be carried out. Please keep the pathways clear, particularly over here. If you could just like squeeze a bit to that side, that'd be perfect. Same there again, and yeah, as far as I'm concerned, that should be fine. Also, during the question and answer session, please do not leave. Wait till the end if you've got the time. That'd be really nice, because it's really annoying for the videotape as well as for the audio. It's really busy and people are leaving. If you really have to leave through the back door, because otherwise you walk directly in front of the video camera that's standing there. Also keep in mind these cameras, because it's really not nice if like people stand in front of them and block the view, because everything, as you know, is going to be on the internet and streamed. But that was it about that. And as you know, internet banking is easy to use, which is well, apart from attracting users, it's always attracted exploiters. And whilst most exploits target Brain version 1.0, there is lacking important security fixes, such as do not enter pins and TANs on strange websites. Other attacks are much more sophisticated, and Thorsten Holz will tell us more.
Okay. Okay, thanks a lot for the introduction, and welcome to my talk on banking malware and keyloggers. My name is Thorsten Holz. I'm a PhD student from the University of Mannheim. So this is something you're probably familiar with. So it's just a common phishing mail. It pretends to come from eBay. It informs you that you have some problems with a recent purchase on eBay, and you should click on a certain link that's embedded in the email. So, and if you take a look at the link, it doesn't seem to be legit, so it's pointing to somewhere in Russia, so probably this is something like a scam. So a classical phishing attack looks from a schematic point of view like the following. We have the victim who does transaction with the online auction site. In our case, this would be eBay. And in order to authenticate against the online auction site, the victim has some credential. So this is typically something like a username and a password. So the victim opens a connection to the online auction site, provides the credentials. This is the typical login step. And then the victim can, for example, purchase something on the online auction site. The attacker wants to get access to those credentials in order to impersonate as the victim against the online auction site. Therefore, what the attacker does, he sends a phishing mail to the victim. This is what we've seen in the slides before. And then the victim is lured into opening an imitation. So here, the victim goes to another site that looks like the typical online auction site. So it pretends to be eBay, but in reality, it's just a scam server that's located somewhere in Russia or somewhere else. So the phishing website then also asks the victim in order to reveal the credentials, so it asks for username and password, and if the victim is dumb enough to enter those credentials, the credentials are sent to the attacker and he can start to abuse it. So this is the classical phishing attacks that we see since a couple of years. They are lucrative in practice, but from an attacker's point of view, the main problem is that it's too much effort. So basically the attacker can only get one credential from the victim. So he needs to lure the victim to another site in order to get the credentials for the banking website or to get some other credentials. So this kind of attack is, from an attacker's point of view, not really efficient. So what the attackers started to do recently, so in the last 2, 3, or 4 years, they are now using malware, since this is way more efficient, since you do not only get one credentials from the victim, but you can get tens or even more credentials from just one single infection. From a schematic point of view, keylogger-based attacks look like the following. So the attacker somehow gets the keylogger to the victim. Keylogger is just a simple malware program that records the keystrokes. We will have some examples of how those keyloggers look in practice later on. Then the keylogger basically observes the behavior of the victim. For example, if the victim goes to a banking website, the keylogger records the authentication, the account number together with the password. Or if the victim goes to a webmail provider, also the username and the password are recorded. And then those stolen credentials are then sent to the so-called drop zone. A drop zone is simply a server located somewhere in the internet. You can think of it like basically providing some kind of database which collects stolen information. So those are typically web servers with a simple PHP web application, and they basically are the endpoint for the keylogger, which just drop the data to the drop zone. And then the attacker can basically access the drop zone, and then he gets an overview of what credentials are stolen, and he can basically collect all stolen credentials on one side and then start to abuse them. For example, go to the bank and make a transaction or something like this. So this is the type of attack that gets more and more popular recently, since it's the easiest way for an attacker to get more credentials from just one single infection. So here another email, which is basically one of the things that's behind this. So we see an attack vector that was used from, I think, probably July until December this year. Basically what they do is they send in a spam mail that pretends to come from UPS. In this example, there are other mails that pretend to come from FedEx. The story is that a package was supposed to be delivered to you, but you were not at home. Therefore, UPS sends you an email, and within the attachment, you find more information. And of course, there is just malware that you install. But this kind of simple tricks, the simple social engineering, is enough in order to infect thousands, tens of thousands of victims. So simple social engineering is still one of the things that's most attractive from an attacker's point of view. So I urge you, take a look at your spam mails. You find pretty interesting things there. So do not throw away all your spam, but take a look at it from time to time. And in the rest of the talk, I'll just basically, this is the starting point of my talk, the motivation, and then the rest I'll tell you more what's behind this kind of scam mails. For the outline, in the first part, I'll talk about different kinds of banking Trojans. Netel Limbo is one family. It's a more simple one that relies on browser helper objects, which are basically plugins for Internet Explorer. Then, as a second example, we have Zeus, which is one of the more advanced banking Trojans we see currently in the wild. And then I briefly also mentioned a few other ones, since there are probably 10 or 20 families out there that are more prevalent, so that are interesting to study. Then in the second part, I'll talk more about empirical data, so what we found when studying this kind of keyloggers during the last couple of months, and briefly a conclusion about how you can protect yourself, which will basically be the conclusion of my talk today. So in order to understand how Netel operates, we need to take a look at browser helper objects, so-called BHOs. You can think of them as some kind of plug-in for Internet Explorer. So they are a COM object, which is basically loaded by IE on startup. So when Internet Explorer starts up, the registry key that's in italics is basically accessed by IE. Within this registry key, you find several subkeys, and each of those subkeys is loaded as a plugin within IE. The file that's actually loaded by this registry key is referenced within another Hive, which is in the second part of this slide. And there you find basically the DLL that's then loaded into IE. Popular examples of BHOs are, for example, the Acrobat add-in, with which you can with which you can watch Acrobat files within your browser, the Google toolbar, or there are hundreds of other toolbars which are also all implemented as a BHO. So BHOs are not malicious per se, but on the other side, they can be abused quite easily. Because they have an interesting feature, they can register to several browser events. For example, they can register to something like document complete, which means that the document has completely loaded. Or another event is before navigate, which is basically sent before the browser starts to open a connection to another site before it starts loading. There are other events that can also be registered, and then you get a callback each time one of those events fires. And another interesting property of BHOs is that they can access and modify the whole DOM tree, which basically means they can modify in an arbitrary way the website you currently see. For example, they can inject new fields within your web page, they can read out the content of the website, things you have entered in boxes and all this kind of things. So from an attacker's point of view, they are really valuable since they allow an attacker to basically observe everything you type into a website, which is basically the perfect starting place for malware. NetHell itself is implemented as such a BHO. Here are some characteristics. For example, it drops several files under C Windows System 32. For example, lm.dat, which is the config file, which specifies which URLs should be observed. And then each time the victim goes to one of those URLs, the BHO starts to record all the information you enter on those sites. So, for example, they configure the malware to observe all access to, let's say, postbank.de, and then each time you go to postbank.de, the BHO starts to monitor everything you type into the web form. There's a file called alog.txt, which stores all the information that's collected from the BHO. And the BHO itself uses varying names. For example, GCON D32DLL is something I've seen quite recently very often, but they change this from time to time, so you cannot fingerprint just based on the BHO name. Analysis is rather easy. Easiest way is probably with Ollie. Basically, take a VMware, infect your Internet Explorer, then attach with Ollie, and then you can, within Ollie, just attach to the BHOs that are loaded, and then you can see what the BHO is doing. I have some screenshots, so probably you cannot see this in the back, but I've some. You still cannot see it in the back, but I will upload the slides just after my talk and just explain what you see here. So this is basically the code you see in Ollie, and here we see something like a file name, in this case C Windows System32 lm.dat, which references the config file that's loaded upon startup. Then a bit later within the code, you see a URL, in this case sendliman.cn/sdt.php, so this provides us with a domain name, which is probably the drop zone, so this is the URL that we're interested in, since this is the drop server, so the server where the keylogger sends the stolen information to. And if you analyze the code a bit further, you see that an HTTP connection is established to this domain, and then it posts data to that domain. If we go to this specific URL, we see at first nothing, so it's just an empty page. So we see just a placeholder and nothing else. But if we play a bit, for example, if we go to /admin.php, then you see something like, please log in, and it asks for a login and password. So this seems to be the access point with which the attacker can access all data that's stolen here. Okay, then some miracle occurs that I cannot reveal too much details what we do then, since if I talk too much about this, the attackers will figure out what we do, and then they can close the things that are still open for them. So therefore, I refrain from revealing too much details, especially since it's also videotaped and available on the internet. If you want to have details, just talk to me afterwards during a beer or something like that. So, so a miracle occurs, and we somehow get access to the log files that are behind the drop zone. This is an example of how such a log file looks like. So these are actually 3 different logs within one. So on the first line we see a timestamp. So this was recorded at a victim's machine at the 8th of July 2008, somewhere in the evening. We see 3 different entries within the